Hey everyone, welcome to season 8. So excited to be here. This season, we are going to be talking about Elixir in regard to other languages, and we're going to be having some new co hosts and hosts on the show. So, Owen, welcome.
Hey, Sandy.
You excited for this season?
I'm so excited. I'm officially a co host now. And yeah, we've already had a couple of conversations, and those have been great.
Yeah.
And we're going to have many more interesting conversations this season. And I'm looking forward to it.
We're looking forward to more.
Yes.
For sure. We're also going to have Dan come on as a co-host. You've heard Dan in the past, and me and Alex are going to be staying on, so that's super exciting. We're saying bon voyage to Eric. Thank you, Eric, for everything you've done for the podcast up until this point, and we're rooting for you on your next adventure. But yeah, generally just like super excited for the future and all the people that we're going to be talking to this season. Owen, is there anyone in particular that you're super excited about that we're going to talk to?
I was actually excited to talk to Devin Estes. I'd seen some of his talks early on when I was learning Elixir about testing and just kind of code quality and that kind of stuff. And so that was a great conversation.
Yeah, so that's coming up. And I'll be talking, I'm so excited that we're going to be talking to Cassidy Williams from Remote. Been a big fan of hers for a long time, and it'll just be so cool to hear like different talking points from maybe a non-traditional, non-Elixir view. So this will be fun. Are we ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Are you ready?
All right, let's get into it. On a side note, here at SmartLogic, we are hiring for a mid-level Ruby on Rails or Elixir developer, a product designer, and for a staff engineer. Come join our team and enjoy working from home with great benefits, flexible hours, and a work-from-home stipend, and professional development opportunities. All right, now here's the show. Welcome to Elixir Wizards, a podcast brought to you by SmartLogic, a custom web and mobile development shop based in Baltimore. My name is Sandy Mint, and I'll be your host. I'm joined by my co-host, Owen Bickford. Hey, Owen.
Hey, Sandy.
And my producer, Bonnie Lander. Our theme this season is the Elixir in a Polyglot Environment, where we talk about how Elixir works in other languages. Today, we are joined by super special guest, Miguel Cobá from Shore. Hey, Miguel, thank you for being here today.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
We're so excited to kick off this season. We've been talking about this a lot, just in the Elixir community over the last few months about how, yes, we do love Elixir, but how do we reach out to other communities and talk about how much we love Elixir? And we realized we've got to talk to people from other communities too. So can you tell us about what, I guess, a polyglot environment actually means to you and how you might use Elixir with other languages?
Yeah, I think it is a very common thing right now. It is very hard to find a place where you only use one technology because there are strengths in different technologies, and companies or startups or any business will try to leverage all those strengths for the benefit of the company. So in this case of technology and programming languages, there are a lot of languages that are very powerful for specific applications. So it's very common when you join a company to find a mixture of all tested technologies, new, maybe with some rough edges technologies, but everything, it makes it interesting. So I think that is something that we will find more and more every day.
Before we started, you mentioned working a little bit in Ruby lately. So you're really doing polyglot. If you're Ruby, Elixir, what else? What other kind of languages are you working in?
Yeah, I have worked in a lot of things that I like and many that I don't like, and I don't work anymore on those. But the things I have worked in the previous job and right now is more with functional programming languages because I like this style of programming, this way of thinking about problems. And now that I have to use orient programming languages, I feel even more difference in paradigms because it's very hard for me to now think about mutating objects or a state and things like that. So it is different. In the previous job, I was doing front-end programming with Elm. Elm is a very not very known programming languages, but it is a full functional programming language in the heritage of Haskell. So at the beginning, it's a little hard to understand, but once you get it, it is very cool. It makes you think about solving problems in a very different way that you are used to. And now I am working on the backend, doing APIs and server stuff, and it is very different. It is a slower pace because the changes are not so fast as in the front end. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to switch, because it was super, super fast. And I was, okay, let's hold on a little and now move to the backend. And many years ago, I used Ruby, but from Ruby, I jumped to Elixir, and I loved Elixir. The way that combines several paradigms from metaprogramming and functional programming, I don't know, pattern matching, things like that. That mixture is very special, very unique, and allows you to express very, I would say, elegantly solutions to problems. So I like that a lot. But yeah, there is a lot of Ruby. Also, when I have to do things in Ruby, I like it because it is a funny language to work with. It is funny to work with Ruby, but it is also sometimes like, why is this happening? Where those come from? Which part of the code is this defined? So those times are not so easy, but the language is very, very funny.
I have heard a lot of descriptions, but not funny. Can you describe why it's funny?
I mean, you can read it, and it is like reading a letter sometimes because of all the domain-specific languages that are created with Ruby. You can read it and say, okay, return if this, or do this unless this other thing. So maybe you can read it. It's not so hard and structured and, I don't know, squared. But that same flexibility is also a problem when you get to a new project and you don't know which libraries they are using. Those libraries are injecting a lot of magic to the code. You see the code and say, okay, I read it, I know, or I understand what it is doing, but I don't know why it is doing it. So it is for people like me that like to know where this is defined, or where this is done, is like, why this is happening. So it is interesting. And this switching between languages, as they are very different, the vision they have of programming languages is very different. This switching between them, it is sometimes a little hard, because you cannot switch. For example, for me, in the same day, I cannot switch from one language to other. Maybe for the next day, okay, but in the same day, you're switching. Okay, I'm going to do 1 hour of Elixir and then 2 hours of Ruby. It is hard because it is, okay, let's switch something here. It's a little hard. It's nice.
Yeah, and you can kind of get into a similar situation I ran into this recently with a library that might have leaned a little bit too heavily on macros, where even in Elixir, you can kind of add a bunch of magic with those macros, and then it makes it hard, to find out why things are happening and how they're happening the way they are. But yeah, I've seen a little bit more of that in other languages than with Elixir.
So maybe we jumped real hard, real fast into all the different languages that you're learning. Can you quickly give us a background on where you started programming, how you got into programming, but also maybe like specifically, what was your first language? What was the first language that you learned how to program with?
Yeah, my first language was HTML, reading it from a Nintendo magazine, Club Nintendo magazine, that they have every month one section about HTML. And I just read the pages, the text, trying to understand, okay, I like it. And then in high school, I come from a small town in the south of Mexico City that the high school didn't have a computer room or lab. So we have very old computers, and when I arrived there, for me was, wow, I have to know how to work with those. So I started looking for information about it, but sadly there were not so much information. So I found one book about BASIC, and I started reading it because I didn't have a computer at home, only the one in the high school. So I can only use it once or 2 days per week when I have the classes. And all the week I used to write code in a sheet, and then when I arrived to school, I copied it and tried to make it work. So that was my first language, my real language that I type in a computer, BASIC. And BASIC is very...
Are you saying you hand wrote BASIC code on a piece of paper,
Yeah,
and took it to school and typed it in?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Nice. Did
I
it run?
used to
Like,
read.
was it like perfect when you typed it in?
Yeah, yeah. And there were not so many computers in that town, and computers were very expensive at the time. Now it is very easy to get computers in a library or in your phone. Even a cheap phone is very powerful computer. But at that time, it was not easy. And this town where I grew up, it was even harder. So it was, you have to use any opportunity you have in front of you. And for me, it was that. So yeah, I learned reading books.
That's so fun. I always talk about how ridiculous I think it is that I had to take my tests in the computer science classes on physical paper with pencils and stuff, but I guess some people do have to do it out of necessity. So, I hope you win awards for that. Just commend you for that effort there. I guess so. If that was your first experience with it, then when did you kind of think of it as more of a career path? And I guess I feel like when you're learning how to program, you start learning more languages. And that's sort of the idea here is that, in a polyglot environment, you start learning more languages and then that helps you become a better programmer. But the circumstances in which that happens can really shape how that direction goes. So when you were learning multiple languages, were you just learning? Were you in school? Were you at a job? Where were you when that happened?
Yeah, I decided to follow this career when I had to pick one of the offers that the university had. So I at that time I liked computer. I said, okay, I'm going to study computer engineering, and that's it. But in the university, I don't really learn to program because it was not the focus of the career or the computer engineering. So I learned when I started working. So at the middle of the university courses, I started working, and there is where I started learning a lot of things. And by doing, I started learning C by programming smart card readers and things like that, just with people that trust in you and give you the opportunity to break things. So that was an opportunity for me because I could break things and learn by breaking. So I learned when I started working. And from that, I started learning about all the different things that existed, and I didn't even know that they existed because there were not much information about it at the time. Now I think it is very good. The offers that people that is starting at this field right now, it's huge. It's amazing. You have courses, you have boot camps, and you have free courses, and you have YouTube, and you have books, printed books, or even friends, or I don't know, maybe in the library you can go and learn it. But at that time, it was very hard. But now it's also very hard in another aspect because anyone can learn. So you have more competition to learn, to get a job, to find, I don't know, your place. So I think it is, they have different challenges, people that is learning now than the challenge I had, for example. But at least the offer they have to learn, it is amazing. So I try to contribute a little to that by writing, because for me it was hard to find this or to find someone that explained things to me because there were not many people that knew about this in my town. I like to learn and to explain it. So that's why I write blog posts or books or whatever, because I like to explain at the same time that I am learning something new.
Yeah, and to give context to all of our listeners, Miguel, I think we first saw you on in the Twitter sphere when you were talking about your book 100 Elixir Tips. So just to jump around here, you said you like writing, you like to give back by writing. How did you get the idea for 100 Elixir Tips?
Yeah, it is a project that just occurred to me one day. I was on Twitter and I started to be more active on Twitter. And I also wanted to do more things in Elixir. So I started writing more blog posts about different things in Elixir. But then I started to make the like a habit of writing every day something in Twitter to be more active. So I say, what can I do that is not very hard to do, that I can do constantly and doesn't take a lot of time? So I started writing these tips in it, and I started writing one every day. When I arrived to the number 50 or 40, something, I said, okay, maybe I can compile this in a book, put it in a PDF, and just make it available for someone. And many people started liking it because previously to this, I wrote another book about deploying Elixir. I write for me mainly because it is like a reference for future me, because I am very bad memorizing things and remembering things. So I need to write it as a reference for me when I need it again. So that's why I write articles. But then I started with topic of deploying, and I wrote a book about it, compiling the articles that I put on the internet, and it was very well received. So I say, okay, maybe I can create another one, because I have already done most of the job publishing every day in Twitter. So I collected all the things that I publish on Twitter and put it on PDF, and that's it. That's why I created it.
Are there a couple of standout tips, either tips that you always go back to or tips that you think like people just need to like hear about?
Not a specific tip. What I like about those tips is that they show how, I don't know how to say it, but how easy it is to write and read Elixir. It is very, you can write with the functional paradigm very beautiful things, but you can express solutions to things using these paradigms. And Elixir is very comprehensive, and you can write in few lines very interesting things, like when you are mapping one list of things into another, and you can transform one thing in another. It is very easy to do it, and you can see the cascades in Elixir, and it looks like, I don't know, like a drop of water that is falling, pom, 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 and at the end you have a completely another thing. So those tips are small, like snapshots of the things you can do. It's not a full program, because obviously a full program is completely different. You have to take care about more things, like maybe design, good practices that you are using, many other things. But this is just to focus on the language and see, okay, look, this is like a small snapshot, a small light that shines for a second, and then you forget it. And that's it. It's just funny.
Right. I was curious because I saw that you also had a book about, it was kind of meta. So it was teaching developers how to write. Was that about writing books or about how to write like tips or?
It is about writing books, but aimed to developers. We as developers are very weird pack because, I don't know, I think a normal person just open a Google document or a Word document and start writing, and that's it. And for us, is okay, but maybe something happened to my computer. I need to have a backup, or maybe I want to go back to 3 versions before. We never do that, but we have to do it. I have to put it in a version control system. I'm going to put it to GitHub, things like that. So we are that way. So we have to put it in a directory with a certain structure, and one folder for the images, one folder for the text, then maybe a make file to process it and transform the images and optimize them, and then keep everything under source control. So I wrote this guide because that's the way I wrote the books. It is the way I write programs, and it is the way I write books, and I keep it in a version control system. I have some scripts to transform the data and to generate the final product, in this case, the PDF or the EPUB file. So I wrote this guide, and this was a project that I get inspiration for with a course that Gumroad published that was called 14 Days Challenge, where they challenge you to put something to sell using their infrastructure in Gumroad. But I followed that course, and this was my project to sell something. So that was what I did, a guide about how to write books if you are a developer. So that's what I did. It was my first book.
That's so fun. I think I saw something about that. I know some people who are trying to publish for themselves will go through Gumroad. I think I've seen that course before. It's really cool that you took that and you're talking about that now. I'm also really curious, is all of this separate from stuff you're doing at work? This is all just stuff you're doing on your own time, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I have my day job, and at nights I write. I learn things, the things that I find interesting. I write about them, maybe a short article. But then when I start learning, I see that there are even more than what I learned initially. So, okay, maybe I should write a second article or a third article. Then that initial blog post, now it is a series of blog post. So, for example, for the deployment in Elixir, I just wanted to do a guide to deploy using Elixir. But then I ended with 8 articles, one for Fly.io, one for Render, one for Elixir, one for Heroku, and a lot of things. So that's how it started and how it ended. So sometimes you cannot stop and you just keep going and see what happens.
I think that's what we call that escalated quickly.
Yeah.
So, what kind of projects, if you can speak to it, are you working on at Shore that might use Elixir alongside other languages?
I am writing my third book about Elixir right now. It is the second part of deploying Elixir, but this is for advanced topics because almost 1,600 people download the book, and a lot of people wrote me with the feedback about it, and many people say, "Oh, have you think about writing about Kubernetes or deploying to bare metal, maybe a VPS or I don't know, a lot of topics." I said, no, yeah, I thought about it, but I haven't time to write it. So maybe I can put that in a second part. So as more people come and give me feedback, I say, okay, maybe there is enough material to do a second part. So I am writing this second part of deploying Elixir with these advanced topics that are not considered in the previous one. And in this, I will write about Azure or AWS or bare metal installs or Kubernetes or things like that. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Cool. I mean, there's so many projects.
Yeah.
You're like just like a content creation machine right now. And that's just like making me tired a little bit. Just thinking about
it. It is a lot. Yeah, it is. But it is fulfilling. I don't complain. I like it. I write for people that is learning as me. I am learning all the time. I don't consider myself an expert in anything. It is very hard for me to say something like that, so huge like that. That word is very scary for me to say I am an expert. But I am learning all the time, and I write what I learn. And I like to write it in a way that if it was me, the one reading it for the first time, I could learn it in the way I like it. So what I find fulfilling is that a lot of people find it useful the way that I write it, and they don't expect that I am an expert. They just want to learn something new. There is always people learning things. So if I can help them to learn Elixir, for me, that is perfect. I don't need more than that. There are, of course, a lot of books for advanced topics. I don't know, metaprogramming or internals or compiler creation. Yeah, I will never do something like that. I am not that kind of
Never
person.
say never.
No, but it's not my goal. I write for people that it is on the same stage of learning as me. So I think that there is enough people in that stage to be always providing information and material for them. So that's my goal.
So tying together this kind of learning process with the Polyglot environment that we're kind of thinking about this season, you talked about deploying Elixir in Kubernetes and some of these kind of more advanced infrastructures. For someone coming from like a kind of a primarily Elixir Phoenix type of non-Polyglot environment, what are some of the surprises you might discover when you're deploying to Kubernetes, where you're probably connecting to other services and other languages?
I think it is very different how you deploy when you are creating a small application or monoliths that when you do this jump to the microservices or the cloud or things like that, because it is not easy anymore. You have to consider a lot of things, and you also have to program how the infrastructure it is. And that is something that nobody tells you before. You just, okay, I'm going to compile the project and that's it. Or I'm going to start the server in port 8080 and that's it. And when you go to a company that does all this orchestration and Kubernetes and AWS and continuous deployment, is completely another league. A lot of scripts everywhere and a lot of checks before going to production. A lot of languages that work differently. Their deployment process is different. For example, for Ruby, it is very heavy to create the deployment bundle compared, for example, to Elixir. You have very big bundles for Ruby and very slim bundles for Elixir. That influences the startup times, for example, and you never think about it. Yeah, it's going to start, yeah, but when you are in production with some system that cannot be down more than a few seconds, those seconds matter. So the faster something starts or boots up in production is better, but you never think about it. So you start comparing these additional features of the language or products of the language decisions when you use them in this kind of production scenarios that you don't see normally when you are programming on your laptop or your PC. So it is interesting to compare how the language features reflect in a production environment when you mix things that are, for example, compiled or interpreted, or I don't know. For example, we have right now Python, we have Ruby, we have Elm, Elixir, and all those have very different processes to deploy to production, and it is you have to jump between one on the other to have the full system working in production.
Yeah, so that is everything you just said just reminded me that like a lot of people get into Elixir really do just kind of jump in and they use Elixir and Phoenix and that's sort of out of the box. What are some interesting combinations? Like, do you like Elixir backend with Elm front end, or are there kind of combinations out there that you really enjoy working with that you think work well together that maybe we wouldn't have thought of?
I like Elm in the front end and Elixir in the back end. For me personally, for my side projects, I use that because I think it is a very good combination. You have in the front end the warranties that the Elm compiler gives to you, and you can be sure that the code is going to behave very well without any exception or unhandled error. And in the backend, I think Elixir gives you a very fast way to create APIs, and also there are a lot of libraries to do almost anything, to do GraphQL APIs, to connect to services, for monitoring, for error logging, for, I don't know, connect to AWS, to storage, to process maybe in the background some video, some images, some anything. So the landscape libraries are very mature right now in Elixir, so you can do almost anything without the need to include additional technology. So if you are programming something by yourself or in a small team, you can just rely on Elixir and you can get maybe 80-90% of what you need to go to production and start earning money with your idea, with your startup. You can later add maybe some specialized tools, other languages for things that Elixir is not, I don't know, aimed to that or to solve that. But you can go very far using Elixir in the backend and in the front end using Elm. There is now, React is king right now in the front end, but personally, I don't like it. It's too much technologies. You cannot use it just, okay, I'm going to start with React. Yeah, you need 20 things just to start something with React. So,
is it too early in the season to start ragging on JavaScript, Owen?
No. I mean, I personally, I prefer to do it in Elm. I know that it's not perfect. It lacks many things, but for me, as for side projects, I can do everything I need just using Elm in the front end and just using Elixir in the back end, and I like it. In my day job, I use more things, but as I said, switching between the paradigms in object-oriented languages and functional programming languages is hard for me to do it in the same day, so I try to do 1 or 2 days just to focus on Elixir, and then the other days in Rails or whatever, and not switch too much.
Yeah, that was a follow-up question I had. So if you're working in multiple languages out in your day job, would you maybe split up the work? Like you're saying, you do some language 1 or 2 days and then you switch languages, or does somebody on your team, like, do you only do Elixir or someone else on your team only does Elm, like, for example, or does everyone do everything?
We are mainly specializing in things that we like the most. We try to that people work in the things that they like, because they are more productive, or they feel better, and that's good for the person itself and for the team. But yeah, sometimes there is no other option than just jump and do, okay, there is something we need to do, and I know how to do it. Okay, I'm going to do it, even if it's not what I do every day. So sometimes I have to go to Rails, I have to go to Elm, some React. Yeah, but I try to keep myself in the things I like the most. So for me, this last couple of years is Elixir. If I can be in Elixir 100% of the time, for me is the best. But I can switch to the other if it's needed.
Context switching is hard. Even within an app, like when you know and kind of understand like the thing you're working on, and then you need to like think about a different part of the app. It's a big app, even within Elixir, within a single language, it can be a lot to kind of switch out of. But I'm kind of curious how, if you're in a polyglot environment, say either because Elixir isn't the strongest in a particular use case or because of other reasons, at the end of the day, if you have to use Elixir with multiple other backend languages, what are some examples of how those applications talk to each other? Like how do they sync up with data and that kind of thing?
No, not for specific applications, but if what you are solving has a lot of concurrency, Elixir is very good at it. It is very easy to create process to do something like in the background or asynchronously. That is not so easy to do in other languages. For example, in Java, Java is very hard to create processes and monitor them just to check if they have finished what they have to do. You have to write lines and lines and lines just to spawn a separate process. And in Elixir, it's very easy, just like wishing and it appears. It is done, and you can check the result, or you can just monitor if something happened to that process. In Ruby, is kind of solved with this, I don't know, a Psychic or Hodge or something like that, but it's not part of the language. The language is single-threaded and was not really made for this. But Elixir was made for this, so it is super easy to solve this kind of problems that you need to delegate to a separate process the job and the workload, and then you get a notification or when it is done. So it is very easy. So if you have a problem that have this kind of particularities, Elixir is a strong solution for a strong option to fix it. So that's it. I guess that if you are solving some mathematical problem, maybe Python is better, or C if you are interacting a lot with hardware. But I try to also avoid that kind of companies and problems because it's not something that I like a lot. At least what I try to find is companies that use Elixir to solve these kind of things, or Elm to solve this kind of problem. So I would say that it is best, Elixir is best for this kind of problem that had a lot of concurrency, or that you can split in parallel tasks that you can monitor for the result you want.
I think for like the communication piece, I think I'm kind of thinking of like REST APIs, GraphQL. Let's say if you needed to send data from Python to Elixir, you can do that with APIs, RPC, or you can just, use your database as the way to synchronize between different applications. And you're talking about native languages like C. With Elixir, we have NIFs and tools like that. So if there's something that you really do need to do with another language, then we've got a handful of tools, and I'm probably forgetting a couple that will help you kind of
correct.
interface with other languages when you need to.
Correct.
So when you're hiring people or you're looking into working with different people on side projects, is there anything you look for in particular in terms of like languages that they've worked in before, or are you just looking for somebody who's good at learning? I know we talked about this a lot from different kind of point of views on Elixir Wizards, but in particular, multi-language environments is something I'm curious about in terms of hiring.
I have always thought that the best thing to look for in a colleague that you are trying to get into your team is the attitude, not the technical knowledge or the technical chops or skills or whatever, because the technical things you can learn it. You just give this person time and it will learn whatever it is. We always are learning new things by yourself or in a course, in a YouTube course, whatever. We can learn it. But the attitude, you cannot change it. So for me, the most important thing is a person. If it is eager to learn, if it is a person that gets along with the team, that it is, I don't know, that can learn from the others and teach to the others, I think that's the best thing. Because if you cannot give feedback about technical things to the other people, or you are not going to go far with that person. If you cannot say, hey, maybe we should change this because of this reason, this person takes that maybe personally because it is my code. I am the best, and this is you know nothing, Jon Snow, and things like that. It's hard to have a good team communication. For me, I don't care much about what they know or where they have worked or if they are the expert or in this or that. What I like is that they are eager to learn new things, because we are learning all the time. Even if you have worked in a super big project and you switch to a different company, it is completely new. You are going to learn a lot of things there. So I think that's the best thing. And the language, they will learn what is needed. Frameworks, libraries, processes, workflows, they will learn it in a couple of days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months. They will learn it. After that, the person remains there, and if the person doesn't get along with the team, it's not going to be a good team.
Yeah, totally agree. And then that also kind of reminds me about something that we talked about a little bit last season is if somebody comes in and maybe they haven't worked in Elixir before, but they're learning Elixir, or maybe they already know Elixir and now they're learning Ruby. Do you see any kind of similarities across different languages where knowing Elixir has changed a particular way that you approach a problem or a project?
That happens very often when you see people programming in a new language still with the old language techniques or good practices. And that can be good or bad depending on where you come or where are you going from. Maybe if you, I don't know, I don't want to say languages because it's not fight of languages, but if the code you are writing it is expressive for the other programmers, for the other developers, I think that is the best. Even if it's not optimized, it's not the best. I don't know, it's not ON or one or log n or whatever. Doesn't matter. You can optimize that later when you see that it is having really performance issues. But for me, the most important thing when you are programming is that the code is readable for the other developers. You see that it can be optimized, you will optimize it, but it doesn't matter right now. You need to write code that is good to understand. So if in your previous language you already write code this way that is expressive, you will write it in the new language also in a way that is expressive. In a couple of weeks or months, you will learn the practices in this specific project, and then it will converge to the team, to the good practices. So I don't think in the long term it matters too much, but the thing that matters is that the code is readable for other people.
Yeah, I echo that. Like, I think a lot of lessons I learned from Elixir, they come from Ruby in some ways, just from the kind of legacy of, the creator and everything. But yeah, like understanding that like longer function names, variable names are actually useful more often than not, and trying to make it readable so that I can understand it in 6 months, or that, someone else on the team can understand it, the next day or in a year or two, That's all important, regardless of the particular language or programming paradigm that you're working in.
Yeah, exactly. That's better, because most of the time we are reading code, not writing code. So it's better to understand it when you read it than when you try to write it in a very clever way that you are not going to understand in 2 weeks or 2 months.
Now, I'm curious, we've kind of circled around this. You work at Shore. I'm kind of curious, what's the role of Elixir there? And is it Polyglot Environment?
Yeah, a very polyglot environment. Sure is a company that does software for small businesses. It has been for several years on the market. So over time has been accumulating several technologies that were famous at some point. Now they are not so famous. So we have a lot of technologies. We are trying now to converge to Elixir and React because those are the technologies that we see the most potential in the near future. But currently we have Python, we have Rails, we have Elm, we have React and Elixir, and also we are using Mongo, we are using Postgres. So it is a lot of things that you have to grasp just to fix or to add a new features. Okay, in this case, we are going to touch this old project that is in Python, and I'm going to interact with this other project that is in Rails, and the new one is in Elixir. So we switch a lot of technologies just to create one new feature. But the idea is to converge to Elixir and React because for us, that's the future.
So another thing that I'm also curious about while we have you is you mentioned that, you're trying to be more active on Twitter to kind of reach out, to be engaged in the community. Do you have a particular goal there? Is that to engage in the community specifically or to learn more?
Yeah, the first thing is I want to learn more and to share the knowledge or what I learned with the community. But yeah, in the long term, my plan, my ideal dream will be to not work anymore programming. It is, as the years pass, I think, okay, maybe I should do another thing. Maybe I should be a carpenter and do just chairs and things like that because I don't know, you kind of get bored of computers. I love them, but it is too much. It's too much changing every day, and I am not so young, and so my capacity to learn is severely diminished. So I would like to, at some point, just to live doing content for people, maybe learning, maybe even doing videos about programming, maybe writing more books about the technologies that I like and I will write to put. And if I could live from that, that will be great. So with that goal in mind, I started to say, okay, maybe I should start a community that can be my audience for this project. Obviously, here there is always this thing. Okay, he's going to sell us something. It's not so, but we have to eat. If I work in my day job, I do it. I am doing it because
The
I need
yacht's
to
not
eat.
going to pay for itself, right?
Exactly. My family needs to eat. We need clothes. We need to pay the rent, bills, and things like that. So yeah, maybe we don't think about it every day, but at the end we need money. So it's not that I am trying to extract all the money that you have right now and give me. But maybe I will do 9 for free, 9 things for free, and one is pay something because that is I need to eat. So I follow many people on Twitter that is making a living just creating content. I don't want to be an influencer or YouTuber or something, but many people can do it. So for me, it's okay. I want that too. So I want to do it with something that I like. I like programming. I like to teach. I like to learn and teach what I am learning. So if I could at some point make a living doing that, that would be great. So that's why I started being more active in Twitter, because at some point I would like to do that if it's possible. If it's not possible, well, at least I tried. But yeah, that is the end goal.
Awesome. So before we sort of start to wrap up here, you mentioned earlier about missing types. And so I'm curious, what are things that you love from other languages that you're missing from Elixir or vice versa?
Elixir is a dynamic. It has types that are checked on compile time, but not on writing time. So they are checked on runtime, but not on compile time. So you can compile the project and it will be okay. And when you run it, blows and breaks and something happens. You say, why? And Elixir Elm, for example, since you are compiling, the compiler is very helpful, telling you, okay, here you are trying to pass this and it's not going to work because this is expecting maybe an integer or a string, and it is very helpful, but not just in the sense of it is complaining, hey, this is not going to compile, fix it. It is very academic or like a teacher telling you, okay, this is going to fail because of this. You can fix it this way. And that is a way of learn the language. So when you have a program in Elm that compiles, it works, and it's amazing. I know that a lot of people have mentioned this a lot of times, but it really is amazing just to see run. It's amazing because you not didn't even open the browser, and when you open it the first time, it works, and it's wow, it's like magic because the language is very strong in checking that kind of things. And Elixir is not that way. It is more relaxed. It's more flexible. You can pass a symbol instead of a string, and it's not going to tell you nothing until you try to run it, and then it's failing because it's not finding that symbol because there is a string there. So those are some of the things that I miss in Elixir when I am not working on Elm, because I like that a lot from Elm. What I like from Elm is other things that it has, like this concurrency or the virtual machine or the message passing style that it has. But that is one thing that I like a lot from other languages that Elixir, for example, misses or lacks. So that's one thing. The other is maybe that it is the metaprogramming is not so clear to understand or too easy to understand. Not many people use metaprogramming, even if it is one of the pillars of the language. Not many people use it because it is hard to use metaprogramming to do everyday tasks. So it is something that only the advanced people use. It's like, okay, for me, I have never used, I have used, but other developers have created the macros, but I have never created one. For me, it's something that is okay. Someday I'm going to learn this, but for me, it's okay. It's another level. It's the next level. So,
Wow. And when you were talking about the compiling the string versus character thing, just reminded me of every time in Elixir I've tried to do something and it wouldn't let me because if it was an emoji, that was like, I just want to use my emojis. Just let me do it. All right. So this was super awesome. Thank you, Miguel, for, again, coming on and kicking us off into our Polyglot season. Do you have any final plugs or asks for the audience anywhere on social media where people can find you?
yeah, I am very active. Well, this last month was not very active. I was very worried, but normally very active in Twitter. And I have my blog on Hashnote. It is, if you are starting writing, I recommend 100% Hashnote. It is a very amazing platform to write, and I use it for writing all my articles, and you can save those to GitHub, and from there you can make whatever you want, like creating books. So you can do that. And yeah, if you like Elixir, there is a lot of new exciting things in Elixir, like Live View. That is one of the things I have in my to-do list. It looks super interesting what they are doing with Live View. I have not yet had the opportunity to learn it, but I want. So far, I have been focusing on the deployment and telemetry things on Elixir. And if you are interested in that, you can get free books in my homepage. You can get and maybe learn something the same as I learned them. And yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everyone listening, please check out Miguel's content, his blog, all the Twitter stuff. It's just so good. So much out there to learn. Great. So that is it for our first episode of Season 8 of Elixir Wizards. Thank you so much to our guest, Miguel Cobá, for joining us today. Elixir Wizards is a Smart Logic production. Today's hosts include myself, Sandy Mien, and my co-host, Owen Bickford. Our producer is Bonnie Lander, and our executive producer is Rose Burt. Here at Smart Logic, we build custom web and mobile software. We're always looking to take on new projects. We work in Elixir, Rails, React, Flutter, and more. If you need a piece of custom software built, hit us up. If you're enjoying Elixir Wizards, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast service. Your reviews help us reach new audiences and grow our fan base. Follow at Smart Logic on Twitter for news and episode announcements. You can also join us on the Elixir Wizards Discord. Just head on over to the podcast page to find the link. And don't forget to join us next week for more on Elixir in a polyglot environment.